Welcome to Marriott MBA Today. I'm Nathan Tanner, and we're here with Ryan Bastian, a first-year MBA student who's had a lot of unique experiences traveling and living internationally, specifically in Russia, Germany, and Tajikistan. So please, tell us more about that.
Well, I grew up in Idaho, and I served in an LDS mission in Russia. That was my first international experience, and that's basically how it got started from there.
Cool. So you mentioned, as we were talking earlier, a unique experience you had while serving in Russia that really triggered some of the future decisions and experiences that you had. Could you share more about that?
Yeah, so I was at a train station, and we were picking up some other missionaries that we were meeting there. And there was this lady who was there at the train station, and she was very nicely dressed, clean, and she was begging for food, begging for money. She was about 70 years old, and you could tell by her hands that they were well worn. She had worked her whole life, and now here she was without enough money for bread. And everybody knew her story because it was just a few years later was 1998 when the Russian government defaulted on its foreign currency, and everybody's savings and pension funds basically went up in smoke. And so this woman who'd worked her whole life, raised her family, probably a widow, now she doesn't know where her next meal's coming from. And of course we got her some bread and some fruit and things like that, but the impression it left on me about how there are people in the world that, because of circumstances completely out of their control, don't have the ability to provide for themselves, for their families. And this and other experiences like that really turned my life into the direction of social innovation and poverty alleviation.
Interesting. Yeah. And so your wife is from Tajikistan. How
Right.
did you two meet each other?
Well, in the early 90s, Tajikistan was in the midst of a civil war. This is right after the fall of the Soviet Union, and Tajikistan's a former Soviet republic. So, we've got these factions vying for power. There was a lot of violence. It was a bad time. But the U.S. government was over there doing a contest for high school students called the Flex program. And my wife, who all growing up had been told, languages aren't your thing, you're not going to do this, you should go to a music school or an art school or something. Her mom hired her a private English tutor. She studied really hard, and she went and did this contest, and just miraculously, during the written parts, like all the words, all the vocabulary, all the grammar just came, and she could write everything down and just did a great job.
Wow.
And then during the verbal part, same thing, like just the words came out, and she could speak like, a million times better than she could half an hour ago.
Yeah.
And then after the contest was over, boom, she was back to her regular self.
Yeah.
But needless to say, she was chosen, given a spot on the program, and was placed with a family in California. And another family there in the neighborhood really befriended her. And eventually, when she went back after the program, they sponsored her to come back to the United States a second time to go to university. And that's where she started going to BYU, and we met, and the rest is a love story.
Cool. Another BYU success story.
Yes.
Yeah. So you, right when you finished your undergrad, you were given a Fulbright scholarship to go back to your wife's home country and study or research, I guess, micro-franchising. What exactly is micro-franchising?
Well, microfranchising sometimes gets confused with microfinancing or microcredit, but it's not the same thing. Microfranchising, it uses similar concepts as franchising does in like a McDonald's type setting, except for these are micro small businesses that can be easily replicated and started up with very little funding, and they're used to help subsistence entrepreneurs kind of get a business up and running, get a livelihood going. And I had initially been introduced to the idea by Jason Fairborn, who was at the time working in the Ballard Center.
Okay.
And I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. It was the answer to save all those grandmas, at the train stations and whatnot. And I got help from, people like Todd Manwaring and Richard McClendon. They helped me get this proposal together. And it was very stressful. It was really hard to do while you're going to school and working at the same time. But miraculously, I was given this huge opportunity to go over to Tajikistan and study this. And so my wife and we packed our 2 suitcases and put everything in storage and headed off to Central Asia.
Yeah. Well, that's an incredible story to be able to go back out there and really try to, make a big impact with the people that you had, that your wife had grown up with. Were there any experiences that you had while there that stood out?
Well, of course, it was cool seeing where my wife was born, where she grew up, and all these stories she told me, especially from the war. These streets that she would go down, and there was gunfire and all these things, and I would see the actual places. But while I was there, I got to work with a microfinance bank, not microfranchise bank, microfinance bank, doing market research and collecting data from the field, from their clients. And that gave me a really interesting opportunity to get up close and personal with these subsistence entrepreneurs who were, clients of the microcredit organization, and gave me a really good idea of what it's like running a business in these very harsh, difficult conditions. And eventually I did find some microfranchise type companies or businesses that were functioning in the area. But the coolest thing that happened to me was because of my research, I was able to work with a German organization that basically does all the international development projects for the German government. It's called German Society for International Cooperation. And it was a consulting project where we were trying to help this local entrepreneur replicate his business. It was an agricultural-based business that was helping farmers get their products to market and make more money for their families. Mm-hmm. And the details of that are probably more than we have time for here, but it was an amazing experience.
Sure. Thanks. And then you decided to come back to BYU and get an MBA. What led to that decision?
Well, of course, there's the entrepreneurial legacy of BYU, the amazing reputation of the program. But one of the greatest reasons for coming to BYU is just the access and exposure to the social innovation scene. Todd Manwaring and the Ballard Center do a great job, and there's just so many opportunities to get involved, to do different on-campus internships, to get involved with off-campus internships, different programs and things like that. So I wanted to build up my business acumen and still be able to incorporate that into socially innovative projects and purposes.
Got it. Great. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. And students like Ryan are what make BYU a very special place. One of the things that I've really enjoyed in the MBA program is getting to know all of the different students and all of their unique backgrounds. So that concludes another episode of Marriott MBA Today. Thank you for joining us.